What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brandon Smith. So I wanted to cover today's case for two major reasons. First, when I watched this story on Disappeared years and years ago, I remember finding the specifics of the case so captivating. So with this intrigue fresh in my mind, I wanted to further explore and flesh out some of the details for myself. But when I looked up the case online, there was virtually nothing. I mean, there was a few old news articles that took place approximately when the case happened and a few short, brief YouTube clips. But I mean, other than that, there was nothing. And I couldn't understand why people weren't like me and desperate to find out what happened to this person. So that's my second reason. I want to bring some much needed attention to this case and outline the elements of the mystery in an in-depth manner. After all, that's what I do. That's my prerogative on this channel. So with that in mind, let's get into it. The day is Tuesday, February 13th, 2001. The song It Wasn't Me by Shaggy featuring Ricardo Rick Rock Ducent is #1 on the Billboard charts. The film Hannibal, starring the legendary Anthony Hopkins and Julianne Moore, is #1 at the box office. And just 2 days ago, the East All-Stars defeat the West All-Stars 111-110 in the 50th edition of the NBA All-Star Game at the MCI Center in Washington, D.C. 350 kilometers up the eastern seaboard from the District of Columbia, in Bogota, New Jersey, 42-year-old Patricia Viola is walking home from volunteering at a local library. The library is just 2 blocks from her home, so she makes the trip in short order and arrives home just before midday. Her husband, James Viola, returns home from work later in the afternoon. He enters the home and, Valentine's Day presents in hand, he yells for his wife. But Patricia Viola is not home. She will never return home again. This day in mystery. Tuesday, February 13th, 2001, in Bogota, New Jersey, is cold but tolerable. A little warmer than normal for this time of year, the temperature maxes out at 2 degrees Celsius to the positive. Patricia Viola is a 42-year-old stay-at-home mom who has lived in the Garden State her whole life. Called Patty or Pat rather than Patricia by nearly everyone she knows, Viola is a beloved family woman with strong ties to the Bogota community. In 1986, Patty married James Viola. After marrying, James began working for Honeywell International Incorporated as an engineer. The couple has 2 children together, 10-year-old Michael and 13-year-old Christine. The family lives together in a modest home on Chestnut Avenue and are as wholesome and quintessentially American as apple pie. February 13th, 2001 starts like every other Tuesday for the last 5 years. James leaves Bogota for his office in Morristown at 6:30 a.m. and the kids leave for school shortly thereafter at 7:32 a.m. Patty leaves for E. Roy Bixby Elementary School at 8:34 a.m. She volunteers in the school's library. Normally, with the weather not so favorable outside, Patty would drive to the school. However, Patty suffers from epilepsy, and a recent particularly traumatic string of seizures have rendered her unable to drive. So today, she is on foot. Patty spends the morning checking in books and helping the school kids find the research material they require. Everything is normal at the E. Roy Bixby Library. But back at her home on Chestnut Avenue, something is abnormal. At 10:03 a.m., the security company receives notice that an alarm has been triggered in the Viola residence. The alarm company's response team calls James at work, but he is unreachable. The next person in the company's contact list is Patricia Viola's mother, so they contact her next. She tells the force that she doesn't know what caused the alarm, but she will call her daughter for information right away. But alas, Patty is at the library, so her mother cannot reach her daughter at home. Patty does own a cell phone, but she seldom uses it, and no one thinks to call the device. The alarm also automatically triggers a commensurate response from the Bogota Police Department, and they arrive at the home at 10:10 a.m. They knock at the door and receive no answer. They look around the property and find nothing untoward. Finally, they inspect the home's entry points. All of the doors and windows remain locked and intact. With no evidence of an intrusion, the police determine that the alarm must have been a false one and depart the premises confident in its security. Back at the elementary school, Patty's shift is done. She leaves the library at 11:30 a.m. Again, she returns home on foot. En route, she passes the neighborhood's mailman and politely wishes him a good morning at 11:40 a.m. Back at home now, Patty goes about her day. She notices a blinking light on the home's telephone. The message is from her mother and alerts the family to the alarm's notice earlier that morning. The matriarch's message also implores Patty to call her, so she knows that everything is copacetic in the Viola home. At 12:30 p.m., Patty calls her mother. She tells her mom that she isn't sure why the alarm would have been activated, as everything in the house appears normal. At 1:11 p.m., the alarm is reset with a code known only to the house's occupants. Meanwhile, in Morristown, James leaves his post at the Honeywell headquarters a little early. He wants to get in a little Valentine's Day shopping and departs the office at 2:51 p.m. He picks a gift up for his wife. It is a small token of his affection in the form of chocolates and a stuffed animal. He is certain that his wife will appreciate the sentiment. James arrives home at 4:30 p.m. He unlocks the door and is greeted by the foreign chime of the home's alarm system. He yells for Patty as he presses the combination of buttons that end the noise. The house is starkly quiet. James goes room to room in search of his wife, but Patricia Viola is nowhere to be found. Since the two married in 1986, James could always count on one thing: his wife, Patty. The woman was religious in her routine, and James knew that when he got home from work each and every day, he was certain to find her hard at work in the kitchen preparing dinner for the family. So on February 13th, when James arrived home to a vacant house, he knew immediately that something was wrong. Lending support to his certainty was the presence of Patty's belongings. Her coat was missing, but on the counter was Patty's purse, pocketbook, cell phone, identification, and a single house key. The key was used to deadbolt the house's rear door, and until this day had always been left in said deadbolt. The most troubling forsaken item, however, was the medicine. Patty had epilepsy, a condition that necessitated that medication be taken on a very regular basis. The pills that Patty needed to take at these regular intervals were found alongside the other items on the countertop. The scene was sufficiently troubling, and James wasted little time in contacting the police to report his wife as missing. Unbeknownst to James, police had already been to the property earlier and caught him up on the events that required their attendance that morning. Police next spoke to the Viola kids, Michael and Christine. Like James, the couple's children had no idea where their mother would be. they branched out in the family tree and spoke with Patty's mother. She recounted for police that she had talked to her daughter earlier in the afternoon, and at that time, nothing seemed to be amiss. Patty was her usual self and gave no indication of distress that would lead to her disappearance. Investigators spoke to other individuals who had interacted with Patty that day, and again, no one reported the woman as being inconsistent. Police were stymied and left without any relative evidence. The investigation slowly petered out. The family continued to search, but much like the police, they really had no direction to concentrate their efforts. Their concern never subsided, and the sad mystery was a constant presence in the family's day-to-day lives. In July 2002, a beachgoer in Rockaway, Queens, New York, came across a shoe, a sock, and the remains of a human skeleton. More than a decade later, in September 2012, the remains were identified as Patricia Viola. Patty was dead. But how did she end up in a different state? And more importantly, how did she die? The immediate Viola family were not the only ones living at 70 Chestnut Avenue. In December 2000, James' sister Donna went through a tumultuous breakup. The separation threatened to leave her in a state of homelessness. Compassionately, James and Patty offered the woman their home as a temporary sanctuary. Donna accepted and moved into a spare bedroom in the basement. The company, however, as it often does, soon wore out its welcome. The stay was supposed to be for a couple weeks, at most a month, but in February 2001, Donna was still there and for all appearances didn't appear to be leaving anytime soon. Living with Donna was a particular nightmare for Patty. Patty was a fastidious housekeeper. James' sister Donna, not so much. She kept her quarters in a constant state of disarray, and every day when Donna would leave, Patty would enter her room and tidy it up, and every day Donna would return home and untidy it up. The biggest source of discontent for Patty when it came to her sister-in-law, however, was the smoking. Donna smoked in the house, and this was very much against the rules. However, the message never seemed to get through to Donna, and on February 12th, the day before her disappearance, after entering Donna's room for her usual surreptitious cleanup, Patty discovered the bedspread damaged with cigarette burns. Patty was furious. Not only were her rules not being followed by Donna, her family's very safety was now at stake. Patty has never complained to her husband about his sister's boorish disrespect, not wanting to compromise the siblings' relationship. But on the morning of February 13th, 2001, with only she and Donna in the house, her anger has to be voiced. She directs her vitriol squarely at Donna and screams at the woman in the basement with impunity. Satisfied with her verbal lambasting, Patty leaves Donna alone in the manor and departs for work. Donna tells police that she left the house shortly thereafter and didn't return home until later that evening. However, she doesn't have any evidence that would support this alibi, and considering the savagery of the two's last encounter, police grow suspicious of the basement denizen. When the police approach James with their wariness of Donna, naturally he can't even begin to consider that his sister would do anything to harm his wife. However, while not witness to Patty's tirade on Donna, James does admit that in their 15 years of marriage, he had never known his wife to act like this. While police cannot confirm the details of Donna's activity on February 13th, 2001. They also cannot confirm that she had any involvement in the disappearance and subsequent death of Patricia Viola. On October 23rd, 1997, Rajesh Kalsaria, Ajit Hira, and Busan Raval were murdered execution style. The men were killed by Miguel Suarez and Richard Morales at the behest of wealthy entrepreneur Dimpy Patel. Patel believed that Rajesh, a wealthy diamond seller, had scammed a friend of his out of a deal, and because of this, Kalsaria should be killed. So Patel hires a man named Darwin Godoy to find a hitman. Godoy does one better and finds two. He solicits Suarez and Morales to commit the murders. All three men are then paid $20,000 by Patel and told that they could keep any jewels and money that they find in the house. On the night of the murders, Suarez and Morales barged into the home of Kalsaria. Sadly, Kalsaria is not alone. Hira and Raval are also inside and are simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suarez and Morales duct tape the three men and lie them face down on the living room floor. One by one, they are shot in the back of the head. The killers then flee the scene with $60,000 in diamonds, gold, jewelry, and cash. The day after the murders, Godoy confesses and points the finger at his accomplices. The three outstanding killers are quickly apprehended, and on October 25th, 1997, all four are charged with murder in the triple homicide. The murders of Rajesh Kalsaria, Ajit Hira, and Busan Raval took place at 71 Chestnut Avenue in Bogota, New Jersey. Living just across the street at 70 Chestnut Avenue were the Violas. And in February 2001, at the time of Patricia's disappearance, the four killers were due in court. One of the men, Miguel Suarez, allegedly contracted an associate outside of the prison to kill two of the witnesses in the case. Police began to explore the possibility that the two cases involving the houses on Chestnut Avenue may have had a deeper connection than just their geographical location. Had Patty seen something of consequence at the house across the street? If not, did the murderers believe she had? Patricia Viola's name did not appear in court documents, and litigators were adamant that she was never interviewed by the prosecution or considered a witness in the case. Despite the protest, people still believed that the coincidence was too much, and the triple homicides across the street had to have something to do with the death of Patty Viola. With the primary conjecture ruled out, people began to speculate that Patty was instead killed as a result of mistaken identity. They surmised that one of the men who murdered Kalsaria, Hira, and Raval did contract a hitman to kill a witness on Chestnut Avenue, but mixed up the addresses and as a result killed the wrong woman. The prosecution also pointed out the flaw in this logic. With Godoy confessing to the murders and fingering his accomplices, murdering a secondary witness wouldn't really accomplish much. Godoy was the main actor in the prosecution's case, and as long as he was still alive, the trial would still go forward. James Viola also does not believe that the murder of the Diamond Man and his friends has anything to do with the death of his wife. He believes that the two events' nearness are nothing more than coincidence. On January 10th, 2002, Miguel Suarez, Richard Morales, Darwin Godoy, and Dimpy Patel were all found guilty in the murders of Rajesh Kalsaria, Ajit Hira, and Busan Raval. At the time of her disappearance, Patricia Viola was under an unbelievable amount of stress. On top of already caring for her husband and their two children, she now also had to pick up after her sister-in-law. Additionally, Donna was not following her rules, and with the woman not moving out anytime soon, the insubordinate behavior was sure to continue. James' mom was also sick, very sick, And with James being the only breadwinner in the family, caring for the indisposed septuagenarian fell squarely on Patty. Patty was also sick. She had epilepsy. Her license was temporarily suspended, and with her affliction getting worse, her doctor had recently extended the suspension. Patty hated this loss of freedom. She felt that her epilepsy already limited her ease of life, and now, with not being able to drive, she was further constrained. The night before her disappearance, her best friend Toinette held a party. James and Patricia were in attendance. As soon as she entered the house, Patty stole Toinette away so that the two could meet privately. Alone with her best friend, Patty fell apart. Sobbing in grief, she tells Toinette that something is very, very wrong. When Toinette asks her what is wrong, Patty tells her confidant that it is too complicated to go into right now. Toinette has a planned vacation upcoming, but Patty asks the woman to cancel it so that they could get away together. Without hesitation, Toinette agrees. She tells Patty that anything she needs, she is there for her. Patty does ask for one more thing. She tells Toinette to please look after her children no matter what happens to her. The emotion of the ask now hits Toinette, and she, too, begins to cry. Patty doesn't share any more specifics with Toinette that night, but promises to go into detail the following day. This is a promise that Patty will not keep. The unkept promise haunts Toinette to this day, as she will never know what was very wrong with her best friend and the complications that were too much to unravel at the party. Toinette, however, does not see Patty's emotional breakdown as evidence that she chose to end her life. This sentiment is shared by James Viola. He also believes that his wife did not end her own life. He doesn't believe that she would do anything to herself with her mother and her children in her life. Police also don't subscribe to the suicide theory and strongly suspect foul play in the death of Patricia Viola. All right, so what do I think happened? The case of Patricia Viola is an extremely perplexing one for me, and full disclosure, I changed my mind about 3 times while writing this script. It's confusing because so many details pull me in one direction, and then one piece of evidence supersedes everything and forces me to rule that theory out. So let's go step by step. I don't think the sister-in-law had anything to do with Patty's disappearance. I can't see a woman getting yelled at in the morning, then waiting a couple hours, and returning to commit murder. This seems like an extreme overreaction, so I'm ruling it out. Next, I also don't think Miguel Suarez, Richard Morales, Darwin Godoy, or Dimpy Patel had anything to do with Patty's disappearance. Sure, it's strange that a triple homicide happened across the road, but you guys already know my stance on coincidences. They do happen. Seriously, they do. Don't make me give you the list again, because seriously, I'll do it. Anyways, like the prosecutors and investigators, I believe that the nexus between the two cases fall apart when you consider the accomplishment. What does killing a 42-year-old housewife who wasn't a witness over 3 years after the crime occurred accomplish? What does killing any witness not named Darwin Godoy accomplish? Nothing. So while I marvel at the coincidence, I do not see a connection, and I'm ruling out this theory. Finally, I also don't think suicide had anything to do with Patty's disappearance. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. No one ever knows what is truly going on in the mind of another person. So fully ruling out this theory, as in any case, is impossible. The weight of Patty's current situation definitely could have overwhelmed her to the point that she didn't consider her life worth living anymore. We will never truly know the depth of her sadness. However, when it comes to this as a standalone theory, here's where I get hung up. The house alarm goes off at 10:03 a.m. We know for a fact at this time Patty was at the library. So at this time, someone other than Patty Viola must be in the home. As such, I believe that at least one other person must be culpable in the disappearance. So with all of the theories ruled out, let me tell you what I actually think happened. On the morning of February 13th, 2001, there was a burglar on the prowl, stalking the often unoccupied daytime homes of the Chestnut Avenue neighborhood. The prowler finds himself on the doorstep of house number 70. He gains access to the home, but he triggers the alarm. Now, most criminals would flee, but this man is more bold and adept. He relocks the door and stows away in an upstairs bedroom closet. From his hiding place, he hears the phone ring. Then the police arrive. He hears them ring the doorbell. He hears them knock on the door. He hears them knock on another door. Then, quiet. He stays hidden until he is certain that the trouble has subsided and he will no longer be disturbed in his criminal activity. Finally, he leaves the closet. He begins prowling the home. He finds very little in the way of valuables, and he is unsatisfied with the home's contents. During his quest, he hears another disturbance at the door. Patricia Viola is home. At a loss for what to do now, the man yet again seeks refuge in his familiar hiding spot. Concealed in the closet, the man silently considers his next move. He hears Patty talking on the phone and is confident that the woman is alone. When Patty goes upstairs, he springs out of his position and pounces on the woman. He produces a gun but tells her that he will not hurt her. All the man wants is money. Patty has less than $20 in her purse, and this yield doesn't interest the robber. He tells Patty that the two of them are going to the bank, where she is going to withdraw everything she can from a drive-up machine. After that, he tells her she will be free. Patty, with no room to bargain and fearing for her life, agrees to the deal. The man ushers his captive down Chestnut Avenue into his vehicle. He starts the car and drives out of the neighborhood. He keeps the gun trained on Patty the entire time. On the way to the bank, the man reiterates the plan, but the missive falls on deaf ears. The woman in the passenger seat begins to convulse, and her eyes roll back into her head. Unknown to the burglar, his hostage suffers from epilepsy, and she is having an episode. He pulls into a side street and watches as the medical event unfolds. The tremors subside. The woman goes still. She slumps over her seat and crashes into the glove compartment of the car. Patricia Viola is dead. The man's plan is catastrophically thwarted, and with a now deceased woman to his right, he is left with little reasonable choice. He steers the vehicle into a secluded area of the city and loads the body into the trunk. The man drives across the George Washington Bridge back to his home in Queens. When day turns to night and darkness falls, the man drives to a beach in Rockaway. In secret solitude, he drags the woman from the trunk of his car. He pulls her to the edge of a rocky cliff and pushes her into the icy water below. He watches as the tide takes the woman, whose name he never even knew, under the water. The Viola family spent over a decade not knowing where Patricia Viola was. When that question was finally answered, the sadness and mystery still remained. Bogota police acknowledged that more could have been done in the immediacy of Pat's disappearance. And with that in mind, in 2008, Patricia's Law went into effect in the state of New Jersey. The law enforces police officers to accept missing person reports immediately and begin investigating. If the person is still missing after 30 days, DNA samples must be secured from the family and entered into a national database. Patty was laid to rest in Hackensack Cemetery on February 25, 2013, with all those who loved her in attendance. The family of Patricia Viola, as is their absolute right, has been very selective in their media appearances. When they do speak, the pain and loss they feel is clearly evident. James maintains a YouTube channel dedicated to his late wife. The memorial is heartbreakingly titled, "Missing My Wife, Pat." The circumstances of Patricia Viola's disappearance remain unclear, and the case is classified as a homicide. Authorities still consider her death as an open case, and a $10,000 reward is being offered. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Patricia Viola. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Just before I go, please know that you are a wonderful individual who is capable of good. If you are struggling right now for any reason, please remember that we are in this whole darn thing together, and you are here for a reason. Please be kind to yourself and all those you come in contact with. I'm Brandon Smith, and I'll see you next time.